they can.
Yeah, let me just try this once more and see if this is going to work. There, is it working now?
Yes.
Okay.
Perfect.
It just took a while. It just needed to be uncooperative. All right. A very good evening to all of us here in Hawaii and a very happy weekend morning, assuming it still is morning, given that little glitch. To all my friends in Singapore and Philippines and Bhutan and elsewhere in the world, thank you so much for taking time off your very busy schedules to join us here at Future Skills, a grassroots community-led platform to empower communities of need and developing countries impacted by the pandemic. What we intend to do at Future Skills 101 is to develop resilient communities by providing free education, open source innovative resources, such as thought leadership from industry players like our panelists today, change makers, as well as altruistic individuals like yourselves who believe in contributing to a greater good. So our mission is really to try to make knowledge accessible, and it's community knowledge, equitable and engaging to our communities of need. So currently our product offerings, I mean, we have online classes that we are slowly hobbling and cobbling together. And we already have lots of partners who have reached out and started creating their online offerings. We also are having industry panelists, as you will see very soon. And in the near future, we hope to be able to engage local tutors in local communities to help our communities as well. So what we have upcoming is we have makeup classes with Vogue cover girl and entrepreneur Serena Adsit. If you can wave, I don't know if, yeah, we can see you there, Serena. We also have classes from University of Southern Maine. We have guest professors from Japan, from Michigan, and we have partnerships with universities all over. So without further ado, I just want to say that thank you. My name is Loretta Chen, and I'm part of the team that created Future Skills 101. With me is Jeremy Lee, my co-founder, as well as my co-moderator for today's panel.
All right. So good evening or good morning, depending on where you are. So my name is Jeremy, and there's a couple of logistics, right? So our webinar today will be no more than 90 minutes. So for those of you who wish to remain after that to discuss ideas, share our thoughts, please remain in the Zoom after our official closing remarks. You're very, very welcome. And bless you, whoever sneezed. Now, please feel free to also leave your comments, your questions in the chat, in the group chat that you may have during the presentation at any point of time, and I'll do my very best to field them at the end with our Q&A session. And at this point of time, I would like to kind of gently remind everybody to make sure your microphones are mute and to leave your names on the Zoom screen so that we can also have a conversation later on, knowing who you are during the Q&A.
Mm-hmm. That's right. And since it's made its entry onto the world stage, COVID-19 has dramatically torn up existing script of normalcy as we know it. And I don't think we can be accused of hyperbole when we say that COVID-19 has plunged the world into VUCA. We talked about this 2 weeks ago, and made it volatile, uncertain, complex, and certainly ambiguous. It has brought about a monumental change in geopolitics, society, business, and life at every level. So in today's panel, we wish to enable a dialogue with our change makers across the world to find out what they make of the future ahead.
Yep, and we're going to introduce our very wonderful panel today. So our very first panelist today is Serena Adsit, founder and director of Mint Management Singapore, and you will see her on the screen, and she's always looking fabulous. I have no idea how she wakes up like that, but she just looks fabulous any point in time. Now, Serena has been modeling in Singapore and in the region for 27 years and counting. Our Singaporean and Globetrotter friends may recognize her as the face of Chris Lyre's Infinite Journeys in collaboration with Shangri-La. Despite not being the stereotypical modelesque beauty, Serena surmounts all odds and rises in talent, if not in height. She has successfully managed to turn her passion into business, spearheading them to inspire, educate, and uplift all those around her.
José Barzola has a passion for creating social change through nonviolence, nurturing relationships that transcend cultural barriers, and focusing on issues of diversity, inclusion, and equity. He is a highly organized higher education administrator with almost 20 years of experience and success in administration, student development within academic and student affairs. José has also been an affiliate faculty teaching courses on peace and conflict resolution. He's a professional mediator and facilitator for almost 10 years, both in New York and Hawaii. He's currently the educational specialist and affiliate faculty at the Matsunaga Institute for Peace at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. And he's also the president of the Conflict Resolution Alliance, a local nonprofit organization. José aspires to continue to develop his skills as a peace builder. We'd also just like to kind of remind you to just turn your mics off to mute because there's feedback coming in. So if you could just help us with that, that will be great. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so next up also in Hawaii, I would like to introduce Erica. So Erica, if you're here to wave. Next slide. So Erica Nakanishi-Stanis, she's the study tour director of Pacific Asian Affairs Council, USA, a nonprofit dedicated to developing engaged global citizens among Hawaii's youth. Now, Erica has extensive experience in the government and nonprofit sectors in Japan and the US in international education, sustainable community building, and professional development. Her work has taken her to over 40 countries around the world. Lucky you, Erica, lucky you. And every continent except Antarctica. So in response to the accelerated changes posed by COVID-19, she's developing critically needed digital content to ensure quality global education resources for students and teachers in Hawaii.
Sai Tzy Horng is a director at Julie's Biscuits, a household name of biscuit and confectionery across Southeast Asia. At this point, I have to interject, Sai, I really need some of those biscuits here in Hawaii, okay? Those lemon puffs and the Marie biscuits. Oh my gosh, we all grew up with it, okay? Just saying. He's also the founder of the Best of You movement, a socially responsible initiative about appreciative storytelling. Started in 2014, the Best of You is a movement that takes a multimodal approach in appreciative storytelling, particularly focusing on telling the stories of marginalized communities in a bid to educate for social justice and diversity.
Okay, and last but not least, we have Namgay Zam, Executive Director of Journalists Association Bhutan. She's one of the most recognizable faces in Bhutan, and she has more than a decade's experience in all forms of media. Now, Namgay is a trainer and consultant for media and gender issues, and is a mental health advocate, as well as an advocate for LGBTIQ. She's a Young Asia leader and a Fulbright Humphrey Fellow.
That's right. And she's also the executive director of the Journalist Association of Bhutan. Well, thank you and welcome all our panelists. Thank you so much for being here today. So without further ado, exactly as time would permit, it's at 5:20. So Erica, you're on. So let's just jump in right here. Maybe would you like to share with us how are things for you right now in Hawaii? Just share with our friends here. How are things for you in Hawaii?
Thank you, Loretta, for that very kind introduction, and Jeremy as well. I would say that the situation in Hawaii is actually, we've just crossed a bit of a tipping point in terms of the COVID situation, with our case numbers spiking quite rapidly once we entered August. Socially, I would say that people are a little bit over it, although we aren't actually over the medical part of the situation. And the one thing that I think we have going for us is that there is a sort of inherent spirit of aloha here on our islands, where the instinct to care for each other and to take care of our land and our community is quite strong. Mm-hmm. So hopefully we will see people pulling together and sort of recovering our patience with the difficulties in the coming months.
And you are the study tour director. So given the crisis, I mean, what do you think is the future of global education?
So that's a huge question. That's a very difficult one, but I'm told I'm on a timer, so I'm going to try to be succinct. I'm going to speak from the perspective of somebody who works largely with high school students, and also from a United States framework or lens, generally speaking. The way I think of global education, I think there's two ways to frame it. You have person-to-person or peer-to-peer global education that tends to be place-based. That's maybe study tours abroad, maybe exchange programs, things like that. And then I think you have research-based global education, which can be done not necessarily by being in another country. Place-based study abroad or global education, I think, is going to face quite a few difficulties in the upcoming years. Even once we find a vaccine, I think you're going to see inequalities based on resource allocation, on how well economies are reopened to external visitors and peoples. So that sort of place-based study abroad, even though I think it is the most impactful form of learning about the world, I think it will be severely curtailed and scaled back, and unfortunately limited to a minority portion of people that once were able to take advantage of those opportunities. But however, on the research-based side, the sort of research-based global education, there's still a lot that we can do. Granted that it is also hampered by inequalities of access, digital access, resource access, access to quality educators. But you can still do a lot with just the internet, a computer, and a really passionate teacher, or even just two of those things. PAAC has really, to use the popular word of the day, we pivoted our programs as well. I used to do study tours overseas and really was immersed in that place-based, but we've pivoted to research-based global education. And there are some issues with this that do need to be overcome. I think in our public schools in the United States, for example, global education tends to be a tangential topic. Maybe we cover it in world history class, but if your schools were anything like mine, we ran out of time at around World War II, and we never actually got to the Cold War or the Korean War or anything in the last 40 years, which means that all of the things that are impacting what's going on around us right now, we didn't learn about from our teachers. If we learned about it because of self-interest, then that was self-motivated. And those students, if they're lucky enough to be that self-motivated, they can be few and far between. That doesn't mean, however, that the need for global education is any less. If anything, COVID has thrown into incredibly stark relief how necessary global education is. If you don't understand how the world is shaped, you cannot change it. If you don't understand why something is happening to you because a virus started in China, then of course you don't understand how to best shape your own nation's policies to adapt to that and to be flexible with that. Our students can't afford to become adults who don't know about what's going on around them. So at PAAC, the way we're interpreting this question about what is the future of global education is we're trying to stay timely and relevant. And this is reflected in all of our programs, whether it's on the Sustainable Development Goals, whether it's about different cultures and countries, whether it's about current events. The framing question will always be, why does it matter? Not only for you as a person, but for our islands and for our Aina and the land that we're on. And then instilling from that foundation of knowledge, a sense of responsibility and the tools that they need to translate that motivation into action. So, sorry, I can just go on and on and on. I kind of segued, but yeah, I think you're gonna see a lot more research-based type programming and a lot less place-based programming.
Sorry, unmute myself there. I mean, I think you made this really relevant comment. Of course, I went to high school, what we call primary, secondary, and junior college in Singapore. So for you to actually share that, in American education, you actually didn't quite have a lot of knowledge of the last 40 years, right? So unless it's self-interest, your teachers taught you, but otherwise it's a part of history that you may not know. But given what we see today with the youth that are so connected, they're able to ruin a rally with TikTok, much of our lives, the Me Too movement, Black Lives Matter. How do you see your role as an educator and a study tour director? How do you see your global education relating to all these social movements that our youths are taking part in and actively taking part in that?
Yeah, it's a fine line sometimes because we are a nonpartisan organization. So we cannot take any stances when it comes to political things. But I see my job as building capacity. So our students' capacity to not only learn what they think they know, but pointing out to them, getting them to realize what they don't know, their capacity for analysis and objective analysis, their capacity for fact checking, and again, fostering that sense of responsibility in them. We do a lot of programs. So for example, my study tours that I used to do, one of my favorite trip, I recorded, so no one tell any of the other trips I said this, but my favorite trip we do is to the Philippines. And this trip grew out of this concept that you have this sort of missionary model of program that can happen where people will go to another country and say, oh, we're going to dig a well for poor people. We're going to build a school for disadvantaged people, and that's going to help them. Or we're going to, in the worst cases, we're going to save them. And at PAAC, we like to take that model and flip it on its head. And we say, no, people who are in those situations know their situations better than anybody else. And we, as visitors for 1 week or for 2 weeks, are in no position to save anybody. Conversely, we know our struggles in our lands better than anybody else. So as people who share common threads of struggle, which many global issues are very common and shared, what can we learn from these people? And show compassion and show gratitude and humility, and translate back to our home and our cultures and our communities to make our worlds better based on the work that they have done as well. So this idea of not reinventing the wheel, of giving credit where credit is due, and building grassroots partnerships. I think these are things that I have tended to emphasize, and our students really have responded to that. They've come back and started community gardens, advocacy campaigns. They have been selected for the State Youth Commission as representatives of their peers. Many of them have gone on to work for our Hawaii Youth Climate Coalition, which was instrumental in getting plastic bans passed just last year. So we've really seen our students stand up. And I think our role in that as educators is that the subject matter knowledge and the critical thinking 21st century skills that we provide for them, that's armor. They have the passion, they have the energy, but in order to weather other people's inertia, other people's criticisms and resistance and apathy, you need armor. And that's what their knowledge and the skills give them. If you don't have this knowledge, it's easy for that to devolve into being a mob, right? But an informed citizen making a rationally articulated goal and having clear purposes, to me, that is a movement, right? And as adults who do have that subject matter knowledge, to me, that's our role, is to provide the foundation.
I think you made a really good point about, having the armor. And yet also having the critical thinking skills, the empathy, the compassion, because it's such a fine line between a group of really passionate youths and the mob, right? And so just pushing that point a little bit more, how can we begin to seize the day? How can we begin to capitalize on the energy, the passion, and capitalize on this moment and make it into a sustainable movement?
Yeah. It's kind of funny, my instinctual response to this question is we don't. We get out of the way. Black Lives Matter, climate strikes across America, plastics bans in Bali, in Hawaii. Students have formed the core of all of those movements. Young people have formed the core. It's not people like me telling them what to think and telling them what to do, telling them what kind of future they should have for themselves. So in some way, my feeling is that once I help you build your foundation of how to think critically, what skills you need to be effective, how you can perceive the world, my job is to step aside and lift you up as a student. That said, that foundation building is really important and it's really critical. So to be more specific, what can we do? I think there's 4 critical things that nonprofit educators can definitely do to help strengthen their students. One is to strip away this notion that politics is inherently dirty and that being involved in politics and being civically engaged is uncool or where it's shady. I'm not necessarily saying that you have to be a part of the system to make a change, but if you don't at least understand the system that you're working with or against, it's really hard to be effective. So I think civic engagement is something that needs to be much more emphasized. I think the second is that classes in school should incorporate more action. Project-based learning is something that really had kind of its moment in the spotlight in Hawaii, and a lot of schools who've done capstones. But I think this concept that learning doesn't stop at the classroom door, and that if students can connect an out of school purpose to what they are doing in the classroom, or as the case may be now on their laptops at home, then they're much more likely to see the relevance of that and develop a passion for at least one of the topics that they're involved in. I think a third really key thing is building in much more practical skills. I will talk about this till the sheep come home, but I really believe that things like professionalism, financial literacy, networking, budgeting, how to set benchmarks and measure for those benchmarks. These really critical skills that if you have any kind of administrative job you know that you need, we should be teaching them earlier. I really believe that students need a lot more practical skills. No offense to physics and pre-calc, because there's a place for that. But I think there's also a place for across the board practical skills that are also useful. And then the last one, sorry, I know I'm going on, I'm sorry, really passionate about this, but the last thing is that I think students need more opportunities to be connected to mentors outside of their schools, particularly students who are not necessarily going to have networks and connections handed to them on a platter through their family. Nonprofits, Hawaii has a glut of nonprofits. We have so many nonprofits out there. And I think if students were more intentional, or schools were more intentional about setting up those connections, then we could see other experts helping teachers to bear the burden of inspiring students and seeing relevance.
You know, I agree with you. And you know, when I had my coming of consciousness moment, one of my PhD chairs always said this, and it stuck with me: the personal is the political. It's not always dirty, right? It's a framework. It's how it's being sort of how it's being looked at. I think the framework to which we go into that is really important. I agree with everything you said. The one thing I absolutely disagree is that there's absolutely no space for calculus in this world at all, period. End of argument. I'm the moderator, so I get the last word. Jose.
Sorry, Jose, I went way too long.
No, I was keeping time and you were spot on. Jose, so I'll just want to get on, the next panel is on, Jose. You know, just quite quickly, you know, how is it like being a parent during a pandemic? I mean, really?
I gotta say, I mean, it's it really just comes down to your infrastructure and your community, and it's been so important right now, specifically during these shifting times of 2020. And just not even just talking about, like, you know, the pandemic, there's the levels of issues that have come up, and then, you know, there's a hurricane occasionally. So it's been wonderful just to know there's that resiliency, the community coming together. I mean, I have to thank, you know, my wife, my mother, for being there. It's just family, friends who just stop by and drop off food occasionally. So it's part of the community, I think. So and it's really such a Hawaii thing where everyone just kind of comes together. And to kind of piggyback off of some of the things that Erica has talked about, it's like, yes, the cases are going up and there's concern, but people are being responsible. And yes, they're still going up because some people aren't being responsible, but we will come together. We've been through worse, and we will come through this again. And I really just try to focus on the resiliency of humanity. And I feel like every few generations we go through challenges in life. I mean, talking about the history books, it's 75 years since the atomic bomb was dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. 75 years almost since World War II ended. There's 75 years ago, it probably may have seemed like, you know, where do we go from here? And so I really love to just really focus and learn about history and just where we come from, just ideally, hopefully we don't repeat it, and we can learn from that, and we can find some hope, and we can move forward. And that's really what I've been looking at as in just like everything that I do on a daily basis.
And speaking of which, I mean, you are the educational specialist. You're an affiliate faculty at the Matsunaga Institute for Peace. You're president of the Conflict Resolution Alliance. You're program manager of the Seeds of Peace. How do you find time to make babies? I'm just kidding. Because he's going to be a new dad again. No, my real question is, I got you there. I mean, you just said it, right? We have all this strife, and we have an increasingly fractured world. How do you see your role?
So thank you so much to you and Jeremy for your introduction. And one of the things I want to talk about a little bit further is the terminology of a peace builder, because it is very much, I think, a nuanced terminology. People may identify as like a peacemaker or peacekeeper, but the peace build is really where I try to focus on, and because that's more of grassroots, community led. To me, it's really about relationship building. And I'm not talking about networking. I'm not talking about handing out business cards or, connecting with people via email. I'm talking about getting to know people beyond, what we see on the LinkedIn page, what we may see in social media, getting to know them, like Loretta and those wonderful cats that you have right at home. So really just getting to know the individual beyond what everyone sees out there. Like a small story that I have is, so I got to meet Coco Kondo, a Hiroshima survivor. And yes, I've heard her story. I've heard her talk. I've seen her videos. What I really loved about my conversation with her is taking back the fact that she wanted to head home so she could work on the newsletter that she needs to send out to the community, because she knows that her husband isn't very tech savvy, and she needed to work on that and made sure that he's eating his vegetables and throwing out the trash. So the humanity of it, that's really where it's really at. And so sustaining grassroots activism during this era is about finding the humanity in us all. And I kind of talked a little bit about, 75 years since the bombing, and partially kind of leads to, we've transitioned everything to webinars, online webinars, because we have to find ways to connect with people. And that has been the way. We provide a 1 hour, maybe hour and a half time slot once every few weeks where people can just disconnect, just some educational learning outside of your various platforms of, TV shows and music videos out there. And just to show, we had 2 speakers just this past week, who one grew up on Hawaii Island, who her family was interned during the Japanese internment, which till this day, a lot of people still do not know that. And many times that is not even taught in schools. So just to go along with what Erica mentioned a little bit. And then the other speaker talking about her parents being survivors of the atomic bomb in Hiroshima. And yeah, it's in the fact that she married someone who happened to be white later on, and her family disowned her and didn't really want to connect with her. And that journey throughout her life, and just being able to eventually full circle to come back and connect. And what was beautiful about their story in general was that the afterward, where they would tell me that they're like, thank you so much for doing this, but it was more, my kids were watching, my grandkids were listening. So now we have a platform, we're able to connect beyond. And there were so many of their students, because they were retired Japanese instructors from a private school nearby, that were on watching. We had about almost 200 people just there attentive to their every word. So I think there's such beauty that we all can bring. And so I think we just need to start focusing on that. And I gotta give it to nonprofit world. Just not to repeat some of the things that Eric has been saying, but especially with everything that's been happening. So we have, through the Matsunaga Institute, we're an academic program at the university. We have an internship program, and we have students set up in various internships. But if they were set up in a government internship, there's a lot of bureaucracy to kind of translate that into an online platform where they can continue that. But the nonprofit world has been known to be work on their feet. Let's adapt. We can do this. And that's the resiliency of it all. And they've been able to, yes, take on their students, and yes, we can connect with them. So yeah, I think one of the reasons partially why the nonprofit world probably is so active in Hawaii, and I think, I mean, in general around the United States, but I find it more in Hawaii than when I was in the Northeast, is because they are doing some innovative work that is not being done on the government level.
I have another question for you, but I'm just going to move on now to our other panelists, Jose, and then I'm going to come back with two questions for you later on during our Q&A. And I'll still go back to, how do you find time to do what you do, given how busy you are? And now I just want to segue to Sai. This is like a perfect time for me to ask, like, where is my Julie's care package, please? Yeah, send it my way.
Oh, geez, yeah, okay, that is my bad.
No.
No, I'm not joking, because I'm actually going to do it. Yeah.
I'm teasing, but you know, I'm really not teasing.
All of us in Hawaii, right?
That's right. That's right.
No,
It's being recorded.
The care package is for her parents. Yeah, let's just get this right now. Yeah.
He's very sweet. He was going to say a care package for my parents.
Hours somewhere, so I'm having a glass of it.
But really,
already,
guys,
Sai, already. Okay.
But really, those Julie's cookies, I mean, we grew up with them. I don't know what the equivalent here is in Hawaii, but we grew up with Julie's cookies. So, Sai, while you're sipping your red wine and your cocktail, I mean, can you tell us more about what you do with Best of You, and also how is your work helping out with these communities that have been impacted by COVID-19?
Okay, so let me start with what we do at the Best of You, and
okay.
how it does social advocacy.
Yep.
So the Best of You, so I'll just bring it closer, is a social movement that Julie's Biscuits began, and it's vastly different from the logo is vastly different from Julie's. It's just something we really wanted to do to give back to the community, and we made it about appreciative storytelling. And what we did was we started talking about, we asked people the question, who is the best of you, in a bit to get them to take stock of their accomplishments and write in their stories. So when that began in 2014, we received many stories. And then when we got to read some of these stories, they were just amazing. And we felt that a lot of times people are not talking about the best of themselves. They're not talking about the happiest moments. Yeah, it's actually a very negative tangent, and then it goes up again, right? So they're telling, you know, they're talking about pretty upsetting parts of their lives, and that's where they found strength. So we felt that storytelling became a kind of a soft power tool. It's a very powerful soft power, right? To talk about things that we don't often hear about. And that's when I started making it a little bit more socially focused. So I wanted to talk about, as the movement grew, I wanted to talk about things that we don't talk about in Singapore, like foreign migrant workers, individuals with abilities or disabilities or diverse abilities, bullying in schools and what that looks like. And in this 2 years, we've been talking about a very important topic in Singapore that I think has been swept under the rug, and it's called inequality or urban poverty. So the thing about appreciative storytelling, and I'll get to a video, is that it really brings a lot of these concepts, abstract concepts and ideas into life. And then it helps people conceptualize them, contextualize them, and then empathize with people, with other people as well. So I'm going to just share with you a little bit of what we mean by appreciative storytelling by sharing one of our videos that we did. And at the Best of You, every year we do around 6 to 7 personality videos, and they cover diverse topics. This one was done in 2016, and she was a university lecturer who submitted a video story to us saying the best of who she was were these street kids that she worked with in cosmopolitan KL, in a very seedy part of cosmopolitan KL. And these street kids did not have access to schools. So she pretty much set up a street school, but without me talking too much and taking away from the story, I'm just going to share with you the story right now. The video, yeah.
You have access to that, right? So you can screen
I
share?
do.
Okay.
Yeah. Do you all see it?
Perfect.
Perfect.
Yep.
I was asking myself whether I can do this or not. There are a lot of things going on in childcare. The moment that we arrive and then we lay down the mat, the kids start coming. I'm one of the co-founder of Buku Jalanan Childcare. Buku Jalanan means mobile library actually. It is an organization that helps children on the streets by offering them education. We read with the kids, we write with the kids, we draw with the kids, we have fun with the kids. And most important of all, letting the children to have the same experience as other children. Every Sunday evening, we will arrive there at 8:15 something, we will spread the mat, and then the children will come at around 8:30. There will be a lot of people coming. We have 70 registered kids with us, and we teach the kids to help us clean up and everything, sweep the floor, and we will make sure that everything is clean. Buku Jalanan Childcare helps me to dream big. I don't dream big actually, but then when Buku Jalanan Childcare came into my life, I started to dream big. I want one of my kids in Childcare to become the future leader. They can. They can be proud of themselves, telling that I'm the street children that came out from Buku Jalanan Childcare. And I'm here to change humanity. I'm here to change how people live. Okay, then done. Oh my God!
She got me in tears. She got me in tears, Sai, you know, yeah. That was a very powerful video.
So the best of you had kind of like two births. This is like the second one, and this became our calling to do very more socially mission-oriented stuff. Because when this video came out, we didn't do too much to promote it. And it snowballed to 1 month, in 1 month, to around 800,000 views, and it eventually crossed 1 million views. But what was more inspiring was that it really rallied the community to support these children. So within 2 months, we had clinics around the area offer free services to the children and the families of the children that were going to Buku Jalanan Childcare. And then we had soup kitchen pouring in like support and free food as well. And then we had from no volunteers or paucity of volunteers to a wait list of volunteers. And fast forward 3 years, there is actually a follow-up video, and I'm going to shamelessly advertise here. Go to the Best of You website to check it out. They've actually graduated to a permanent space that Julie's Biscuits sponsor. But there are more children right now, and it's become a community center for them. And they're taking on even more in terms of education. So I think some of the older children are doing coding right now, and they're coding for an app, actually, yeah. So yeah, a lot of things have happened since, and this is the thrust of appreciative storytelling. The one thing that we're doing this year in particular is for urban poverty. I mean, we've done it since last year. So the Best of You does around 25 school performances, the drama performances, actually more than 25, oops. 35, yeah, there's around 25 performances in Singapore and around 10 performances in Malaysia. And we talked about urban poverty. What we did was to bring a 1-bedroom. So in Singapore, if you live in a 1-bedroom unit where there are actually no walls between the living room and the bedrooms, right, you're considered living in poverty. Many of these family units pay very minimal rent, and they find it very hard to get by. But in Singapore, as you know, as many of you know, it's very glitzy. People don't think there is poverty or homelessness. It's actually an issue. So, and the problem with Singapore is that the problem about the perception of poverty in Singapore is twofold. Poverty is seen as an exception. So what that means is that, oh, okay, this is something that already happens. It's an exception. It's going to be there. It's a naturalized fact, right? So we're going to tolerate it. That's the problem number 2. The tolerance of poverty makes it such that, oh, these people, there'll always be poor people and we can't help them. This is as best as we can do. So it becomes an easy out for the government. It becomes an easy out for policymakers as well. What we want to do at the Best of You is harness the power of appreciative storytelling to deconstruct or to bring some of those abstract myths and ideas into life. Show students and children, they're the future leaders. Show them that this is the condition of poverty. And then they will say they don't want this to be an exception. They just don't want this condition for future generations to come. And they will definitely not tolerate it. So this is what we do at the Best of You. We just feel that telling stories, right, they just have so much power in changing people's minds and mindsets and ideas about very abstract things like urban poverty in Singapore. Yeah. Sorry, I went on a lot.
No. I'm keeping time, and you're right on time. In fact, we've got questions chiming in our chat, and this is also where we'll urge you all to put your questions in the group chat. We have lots of questions coming up for you, Sai. So I'll keep that for our Q&A. We have about 4 minutes. I have been keeping time. I'm not going to speak as a Singaporean. Are you still Malaysian, Sai? Are you Singapore resident?
I'm Malaysian, actually. I'm Malaysian, yeah.
So, I'll speak really honestly to all my friends here listening in. I know it's being recorded. One of the things that has always bothered me about being a Singaporean is how we've been reporting the numbers of COVID. I've been feeling a little bit embarrassed because this is how we report our numbers of COVID for all our friends who are not Singaporean. We have a Singaporean figure, like literally, like we have a number of Singaporeans in the community, and we have a migrant worker count. So I hear this every day in the news. It's like, oh, migrant worker count is 600 or 200. Community count is 3. And there's a sense of like, wow, we did so good as a community. We kept it down, and I will say that's a part of me that feels, I think we're the only country, and correct me if I'm wrong, that reports the numbers in this bifurcated fashion, Singaporean, non-Singaporean. And I just feel like it's just, for a first world country, it's really foregrounded our inherent inequality that exists, and the plight of the urban poor. I mean, can you shed light both as someone that's residing in Singapore and as a Malaysian and someone who has a heart for the urban poor?
Shed light on, sorry.
On what you see in Singapore, because I know you live now in Singapore, even though you're still Malaysian, but you live and work in Singapore. You still have great ties to Malaysia from the work that you do. How do you see this circumstance playing out? And how we report our numbers, how we treat the COVID numbers, and just shed light on this inherent inequality in 2 minutes. I'm just kidding.
Okay, I mean, sorry, can I swear? It's shit.
Oh.
Yeah.
I've sweared more than that, and go ahead.
I mean, it makes me annoyed and just pissed off, and I complain about it, like the community cases and then the foreign migrant cases. It's just, and I get what they're trying to do at the same time, but they're trying to say that because the foreign migrant workers stay in dormitories, they're away from the community. But then the whole idea about that, it's the entire language around it that's very problematic. And I think that was my pet peeve, that foreign migrant workers who come to Singapore, they barely ever get a value add step up in their lives coming to Singapore. And as of, you're not supposed to come to a first world country and not get that. That's supposed to be promised to you. And so this is something that I want to work towards. I mean, and it's going to take a long time. And I start with the children because they are and I say it's easily brainwashed. I start with the children because I want our children to know that foreign migrant workers are part of our community. We have to at least say hello to them. We have to acknowledge their presence, and we have to know that they've done so much for us. Yeah, that's the first building block. Previous generations, they don't do that, right? But, I'm not going to invest too much time in them.
I feel you. I hear you. I'm so proud to be your friend, Sai, and I'm sure I echo the sentiments of everyone hearing in that, you know, we should be doing what's right. I think, you know, we owe so much to our migrant workers who come in here and pave the roads and build the buildings we build. I mean, that's what Michelle Obama says, you know, my ancestors built the White House, right?
Yeah.
And just that sense of entitlement that we now have, that, oh, you're not part of us. I mean, that makes me so embarrassed. That makes me so embarrassed. But
I mean, I hope the conversation changes. I really do. I mean, as cynical as I am, right? I'm also quite. I look forward to the small wins that we have. Like if I remember, so I'll just share a very quick example. I remember when we were doing this, like trying to talk about foreign migrant workers. Someone who came to one of our events was a 14-year-old boy, and he had participated in our events before and through the Best of You, and then he started to latch onto this idea that we should all be nice to foreign migrant workers. And he was spending his last 12 weekends hanging out with foreign migrant workers, playing football with them, and also just getting to know who they are. And he came for this event to say that, you know, I want this to change. That's a very great small win. Yeah.
it is. And that is why we do these panels. You know, sometimes my husband says, why are you doing this? You know, and I say, it's because we want to get like-minded people and recognize that we celebrate the small wins every day, because sometimes it's so easy to get angry, you know, and with that, it's a perfect segue to Namgay, because she's always like, so much injustice in the world, right? So Namgay, I mean, you've heard a little bit of our pet peeves in Singapore. Share with us, for many people who don't really know what's happening in Bhutan, how is your kingdom dealing with the pandemic, Namgay?
Thanks, Loretta. Actually, late last night, I figured out that a lot of people who would join this panel today would not have heard about Bhutan, and even if they would have had, they would not have seen pictures. So I'm actually going to take over and share my screen, and then just start with a few pictures and describe what the pandemic's been like in Bhutan. So today, we are actually in lockdown mode, so national lockdown mode. I'm just trying to share my screen. It's day 12, by the way. Thank you for being with me on day 12 of national lockdown. And we went into national lockdown because one person tested positive outside of quarantine after completing her mandatory quarantine period of 21 days, plus a few more, so I think 30 days. It was a very unusual case, and so they said, I mean, the government had already warned us beforehand that in case we test a case outside quarantine, then we're going to go a positive case, and we're going to lockdown. So I'm just going to show. Yep. Hold on.
Yeah, we lost your connection. You're sort of in and out, but yeah, we hear you now.
Okay, can you see my screen now?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so this is a really quick thing to show you. Oh God, thank you, internet. All right, I think we're good now. So the Bhutan context. So this is what we look like right now. It's completely empty streets. Already we aren't a very noisy city compared to Singapore, or maybe even Hawaii, because Loretta has traveled here, as has Serena and the others, Jeremy too, right? Not very, and we have people like them on the streets, so you don't see people like me. Okay, maybe just a few journalists here and there, but you will encounter traffic police. This is the main administrative and monastic seat in the capital, Thimphu. And he's standing watch, like a lone sentinel, when I went to take some photos on the second day of lockdown. We don't have a lot of people. We have just about a little over 100,000 people in the capital. And then you see people in orange. So these are national volunteers. There are more than 15,000, there are almost 15,000 national volunteers now. So what they do is, this one is distributing essential supplies to people. So they drive their own cars. They're super coordinated, and we have them in all of our 20 districts.
Oops, connection in a Himalayan mountain. Oops.
And what's happening in our country is the armed animals. So we have, from the second, third day of lockdown, all of the armed forces got involved upon the command of His Majesty the King to feed. We have about 45,000 stray dogs in Bhutan, of which 15,000 are in the capital, and they all get fed by His Majesty's office, and the armed forces are involved in doing this in all 20 districts, not a single stray. So His Majesty has been quoted as saying that all of our animals, also citizens of Bhutan, and not a single citizen should go hungry during lockdown. So going back to the essential services delivery, so they have a really coordinated system. We've all been zoned. We are piloting it in Thimphu, in the capital, because the density is so high here, population density. So they have essential stock centers, then they have identified shops, so people don't have to come out of our homes. They eased lockdown a little bit just about 2 days ago, where one individual from the house can go, like, walk around in our zone and get our essential supplies for our shops and then come back home. And we have like our movement passes to do that. And this is a good picture. So these are the memes that are floating around, because we only have 153 positive cases as of today, of which only 45 are active, 0 deaths. So health service has been excellent in Bhutan as well. And then you see His Majesty in wearing this yellow thing around himself. So these are our frontliners in Bhutan. So Bhutan has actually handled the pandemic quite well. I actually just submitted a piece to MIT Review the other day, talking about how gross national happiness has played an important role in how decisions have been made in Bhutan. So a lot of the decisions have been made on the basis of compassion and empathy. So we've dealt with the pandemic in a better way than most countries would have had, especially because we've had really insightful leadership. Our Prime Minister is a doctor, our Health Minister is a public health expert, and our Foreign Minister is also a doctor. So I think we have actually the right team to fight COVID-19. So although it's been 6 months, we've had 0 deaths and very few cases of local transmission that were contact traced via the positive cases that tested outside of quarantine. So we're in a good place, Loretta. Fingers crossed.
You know, you make such a good point, Namgay. I was just reading the Edelman's Index of Trust recently, and the US's Index of Trust is like fallen down to like 60th position or something. You know, I think one of so, you know, I think you really raised such a key point that it is so rare to hear citizens just trusting the government and just saying, we have faith and trust. You know, it's not easy these days. In tandem to that, you know, everyone has an opinion on COVID-19, right? Everyone, it's either our governments are working too fast, it's working too slow, it's not doing good enough. Everyone has an opinion on whether or not the economic recovery is failing, it's good. You know, as a journalist, now I ask you to put on a journalist hat. I mean, how do you see COVID-19 changing the role of journalism and citizen journalism? Because also there's this concept of trust, right? I mean, in Bhutan, it sounds like you trust your government. We don't have that right here in the United States. How do you navigate that as a journalist and as a citizen?
You know, it's actually been a real challenge, and we met the Prime Minister regarding this, especially in my capacity as the Executive Director of the Journalist Association of Bhutan, that there seems to be more public trust in government than the media. It's hilarious because there was this aggressive advocacy by the health ministry right at the start. I mean, it was really to fight what the UN calls an infodemic, right? Like, we are bombarded by information every day. So the Ministry of Health would have this little thing at the bottom of their post saying, only believe the things that come out of the Ministry of Health. They did it so successfully that after a while, even when the national newspaper was posting stories, they'd be like, oh, but health ministry hasn't said this. So how can you guys write this? Like, you know, they haven't put it in any of the government websites, like Prime Minister's page or health ministry. And then we went forward. We approached him and we said, I think you need to include trust the media, mainstream media at least. Otherwise, we're having such a hard time convincing Bhutanese to believe us. But the thing is, I think they were so successful at their messaging, and people, like you were saying, I mean, this just shows how people trust. The government's been transparent from day one, and they've really, you know, the Prime Minister has been quoted as saying, it's a small country, everybody must govern together. So he's incredibly democratic, and I think because people have felt like they've had a stake in how we've dealt with COVID-19, starting from the kind of information that is shared among people that people are willing to believe. When the government tells you, oh, there are this many people who have tested positive for COVID-19, stay at home, people will stay at home. I know families who are daily wage workers, and despite running out of essentials, they did not come out in the streets. Instead, they went to social media and they said, can somebody help bring us essential supplies? I mean, anywhere else in the world, you would see people come out in the streets because you need essentials, right? But again, like I was saying, although we are a democracy, the king plays an active role and people have so much trust and are completely inspired by him. So his office is actually supplying essential goods to daily wage workers or people who have been hit hard by COVID-19 for free. So then the volunteers you saw in orange earlier in my photos, they actually reach out to this community and then drop off the essential goods, or if we see posts on social media, then we contact people who wear the orange uniform, they look, and then they go and drop off the supplies. So everyone is taken care of. I think it's because people feel like they're taken care of. The government has not taken them on for a ride, that the public trust is so high in Bhutan. It's the transparency, I think, and the fact it really boils down to transparency at the end of the day. But for journalists, so it's so funny because we have breaking news from Ministry of Health every day. Like there's like this daily bulletin update with how many positive cases, who's in isolation, and then the media takes that and goes breaking news. So we're trying to get our local media to get out of this cycle of breaking news, because that's what's happening in the West, right? It's because all these cable news channels that you're like, there's too much information. So the government is very responsive to us, and then they were saying, how do we prevent information fatigue? So how should we time our posts? How many posts should we make in a day? So we're all working together.
As you were talking, the chat room was actually going arrived to say like remarkable Bhutan, you know, and it's true. I think, you know, we often look, when I say we, I mean, I just mean most of us in development, we often tend to look at US as a model, but, you know, I've been such a huge advocate for Bhutan, your green schools, your GNH, because I think there is so much to be learned and mined from your country, as well as, you know, in New Zealand under the able leadership of Jacinda Ardern. But I have two more questions for you, but I'm going to save that for the Q&A. And I'm just going to move on to Serena, who is also a huge fan of Bhutan, right, Serena?
Yes, I love Bhutan so much. And because we're not very far away, we're only 4 hours away, I always joke with my husband, you know, in our old age, let's buy a home there, let's move there, let's live there. And funnily enough, the first time I went there was for a modeling shoot. And I was a young mom then, and I brought my 3-month-old baby. So we joke, you know, maybe my son is probably the youngest visitor to Bhutan, actually. 3 months old, we brought him up. Yeah, favorite place.
You also have a fun story to share, right? Because you expected your baby because you went to pray at the, is it Chimilakang? And then you prayed and you, right? You'll just share that quickly.
Yes. So the first time I went there was 9 years ago, just when Evan was born. And I just had my other baby, Avalon. She's 10 months. But last year we were in Bhutan. Actually, I went there twice in 1 year, in June and then at the end for my 40th birthday. So while I was there, we went and visited the temple, Chimilakang, which is famous as a fertility temple for visitors around the world. And we prayed. So we prayed for a daughter. I walked around the temple 3 times with a giant phallus, this big. Yeah, very proud of that moment. Yeah, we just constantly went and visited the temples. I even went to the Floating Goddess Temple, which not a lot of people have been to, prayed for a girl. And within 3 months, I was pregnant. And we were actually planning to go back to Bhutan this year, bring the baby back. And just to say thanks, you know, we love the people there. You know, it's such a wonderful, lovely country.
Yeah, you know,
you want to go back again?
Yeah, we all. I want to go back to Bhutan again too. But you know, you're an entrepreneur, right? And you own several businesses. How has COVID impacted you? And what changes do you foresee yourself making as an entrepreneur?
Right. So even before COVID happened, I started to notice a slight economic downturn. So I had already wanted to make certain changes and implementations at that point. And coming off the big holidays of Christmas, Chinese New Year, and then boom, COVID happened. And then April, May were the lockdowns here in Singapore. I knew I was in trouble. So with my modeling agency and casting house, that sector, that industry was actually banned from doing any shoots. Only video shoots could happen. So that means, I guess, your TV media could still continue, but anything that's print form had to stop. You know, we couldn't do anything, so no choice. We had to shut everything down. You know, my staff had to go back home, and I was in preservation mode. So what I had to do, I made a tough decision. I actually gave up my very nicely done up office. It's only been 4 years since I had it, but I, you know, kind of weighed the pros and cons and decided to cut loss. So we gave that up. Also, I refinanced. So I went for the new government-backed lower interest loan, and I paid down an existing loan that I had. So that was for the modeling agency side. My husband and I, we also have some F&B companies. One of them is a bar, and it's still shut because in Singapore, entertainment and bars, you can't open as yet. And the other one's a restaurant. So for them, it was a different sort of scenario. Instead of preservation, they decided to take action. You know, how can they jump on the changes and actually make that work for them? So what they did was they started doing deliveries. Although restaurants and in-dining were shut, they took the opportunity to work on the deliveries. And having not done that before, it was a huge learning curve for us. And you know, just fine-tuning the little issues that came up, we decided to actually have our own fleet of drivers and cars as opposed to working with the industry bigger players on food delivery services. So I think as an entrepreneur or anybody who has a business during this period or any period really, the worst thing you can do is not do anything. You really have to take a good look at the status of your company and really be upfront with yourself, be real, and make whatever changes that are necessary.
It definitely sounds like almost all the businesses that you have been like impacted by COVID, but you still have all this grit. But before I get there on that grit question, I mean, I just want to pick in your brains. How do you see, you know, luxury, because all the Chanel stores are now shuttered and closed. How do you see luxury and fashion and even definitions of beauty changing in the pandemic? I mean, you can't put on lipstick anymore. My friends were saying, oh, no need to buy lipstick, no need to put makeup, right? How do you see this? How will we emerge out of this?
Yeah, it's so funny being considered a model and have and people expectations of me knowing all these things, but in true fact, these are not my interests at all.
Right.
But definitely in these times where everybody, you know, they're either in lockdown or working from home or have real issues of health, job security that are you know, in their face and confronting at this moment. I don't think there's a time and place for any excesses at this point. You know, with fast fashion dying, all the shops, thousands of shops closing down, I think it's a good thing because we were on this way of, you know, acquiring too much for no reason. Yeah, so the fact that everything can be stopped in this like hard way, like in our face way, I feel it's actually a good thing. And with luxury as well, of course, there's a place for luxury, you know, like that quality, that timelessness, that beauty that's in that, but maybe not so much a place for majority of the people right now around the world. Saying that with beauty, now that we've taken away working from the office, commuting, traveling, you know, expensive things, you know, I think a lot of people are now stuck at home being confronted with themselves. Because with all this distraction and layers, a lot of people actually don't know who they are. They don't know who they become or who they actually want to become. So they get bogged down with their work, with their busyness, with the stress, you know, with that daily rat race. And with being locked down, now that you only have yourself in the mirror to look at, I think this is the time you can actually chip away at those layers and those levels of the self that could be fake. So you're chipping it away, and then it's perfect time really to start working on, you know, maybe the hurts that you've been through, you know, the trauma in your life. You know, really figure out the shame, the guilt, the blame. When you can start figuring all these things about yourself, that's when self-realization comes in. That's when you start understanding who I am. I'm more comfortable in my skin now. What is beautiful to me? for me personally, years ago, although I'm in the magazines even this year, years ago, I stopped reading fashion and beauty magazines because every time I look at the pages, I flip the pages, I started to feel bad about myself. And it was a tangible feeling of just not being good enough. You know, they're like, okay, this handbag, you know, this is the new handbag that came out, and this face cream. And then without it, you just feel like, oh my God, am I that ugly? Or am I that just not well dressed? Threw away all those things. And then I started to look into myself. What was I not comfortable with? How can I be more comfortable in my own skin? What do I like to do? How can I say yes or no for that matter more? And all those little things that I started to build up about myself started to build my confidence. It started to show me what I actually liked in life. And then from there, I would focus and hone in on the things that I really wanted to do. So that started to bring up my passions. It started to take over my day. With daily meditations, I became happier. And just waking up every day and really loving who you are, that self-love and loving life. And just a small change every day, because you're the architect of your life, right? Ripples out and changes even your soul group, your family group, your peer group. And just that one shift just makes beauty from within come out, and it just transcends and changes people as well. So to me, beauty is far from an aesthetic. It's really that zest for life and self-love, and then that love for your fellow man.
It really does. And just your energy and your beauty, you know, not just physical. Of course, you're an incredibly beautiful woman. It's your soul, it's that kindness, it's that compassion, and all that just sort of like emanates through the camera and across the oceans. And we all feel it. I mean, Sai was like giving it a thumbs up, you know. So, you know, and with that note, I'm always mindful of time. So I just want to open it up to the floor now. I know that the chat room has been rife. It's been dinging. So Jeremy, you want to just take over? I have a couple of questions on my own, but I really want to hear what our members of the floor have to say.
Yeah. So I just wanted to say, so if you have any questions, you know, do feel free to kind of post it in the group chat. I know some of you are quite shy, so actually you private message me the questions instead. So I'm actually going to ask a couple of questions here, okay? So I think I've got one question here, actually to Sai. And it was around appreciative storytelling. And I think you know, we really found it very powerful, this whole idea of appreciative storytelling. How can we make it come alive in our daily lives, you know, apart from the fact that we can share it on the website, but how would you encourage us to really make it come alive and make it, and you know, positively influence the people around us?
I think in this day and age, with technology, you have a lot of technology, app and cell phone screen pollution. It takes a conscious effort to actually do a timeout. And I would say we started out with the best of you with asking people to just take 15 minutes out of their daily lives before they go to bed, or just when they wake up in the morning, to take stock of their accomplishments, take stock of what's good that's happened to them, or what's good around them, and write it down. I think there's a lost art in, you know, writing down our thoughts and actually taking reflective moments. And that's something that we have to do. I mean, so in our Best of You exhibitions or road shows, right? That's something we get people to actually write down in postcards. So they would actually write down what they feel in that present moment, or just however they feel about a particular event, and they reflect right there on the spot. And I don't know, I feel like, you know, you have to write it down physically. It's not the same as getting onto your iPhone and typing it in. We've always, and this is just the data from our movement, we've always found much more submissions coming in when people actually are asked to write things down than if we ask them to electronically submit it to us. Yeah. So pen and paper, everyone's.
Yeah. I totally agree with you, and I think you know, we always say words have power, and I think the fact that you're just penning down those words really make the story come alive more for yourself as well. So thanks for sharing.
I just want to share a very interesting fact. It's just that if we put out colored pencils and colored pens and stuff, the number of submissions go up as well. People start drawing and get creative. So it says something about that.
Yeah, because that allows a creative outlet for them to kind of just write down their story, and it's no longer just ink and paper, but they can creatively kind of flesh out their story, isn't it?
Correct, yeah.
Beautiful, thank you, thank you. And again, please keep those questions coming in. I've got one more question over here. This is actually for Serena. Oh, sorry. Serena, the question here was, we're very interested in this thing about, during this COVID time, we're taking time, that you took time to really introspect, right? Like it's time to really have that deep self-realization. And you mentioned a little bit about it, but could you expound a little bit more, like where do we start? Is it that easy? Just say, oh, today I'm going to introspect. Does it work like that? Like how does
No.
Get started? How do you do it? Yeah. How do you look in the mirror and be completely transparent and honest?
No, it's so true. And these are, when I talk about like this, they are very abstract, and it's just so hard to get started. To be honest, I've been doing this since I was in my 20s, actually, through just going through trauma and pain, and just realizing that I had enough. I had enough of this. I wanted to work through my fears, my shadows and stuff like that. I started with going for courses. So at this point, like 20 years ago, there was nothing much that we could find online. So I literally had to go and dig out and find the courses that I could attend in person in Singapore. So I think something like that would be interesting. Start with meditation or even journaling. I think journaling, like Sai said, writing things down, writing how you feel every single day is a good practice to start to get to know yourself. And again, it's really about finding your blind spots, not being in denial anymore. So stuff that triggers you, that could be a point as well. So you work backwards. You have a conversation with somebody, this fella like this really pisses the hell out of me. Why? You go back home, have a moment, write all these things down. Now, why has this triggered me? Why do I feel this way? What is the root cause? So slowly, once you get through the root causes, you can find like big areas of stuff that you can work on. Even obligation, shame, guilt, blame. These are big areas that all of us as individuals could actually, it will help us when we can look at our flaws in this way. So yeah, those are the few things I would recommend to start. Maybe meditation. There's so much stuff online these days. Taking 5 minutes even to go through a guided meditation, note-taking, find out what your triggers are, find out when your ego arises, if you have a lot of arguments and fights, or, you're doing something to your husband on purpose, but you just don't want to admit it. Just take a step back in your alone time and just find out why. Go in deep, find out where all your shadows are.
Yeah. I mean, that sounds really beautiful, Serena. I like how you mentioned start looking inwardly, like at our motivations, and at possible areas like the shame, when there's guilt, etc. And start peeling. I always like the idea of peeling the onion, right? Because
the layers, right?
The layers, exactly. Just getting to the layers. And I suppose it takes time as well. You're probably not going to get there in it.
Years. I've been doing it for years, and right now I'm nowhere near where I want to be. But I've done a lot of work so far. So once you can get through your shadows and the stuff that actually hold you back, that's when you can self-actualize. So first is self-realize, and then self-actualize, where you can find out your talents. What you're good at, what you don't want to do. Now I can say yes. Now I'm better at coming out of my comfort zones. I know what my potentials are. And then once you do all these things and you find your passion, that's how you can make your work, your heart's work, your life's work. And then you slowly realize you're on this journey that's already your life purpose. Yeah.
That's amazing. Thanks, Serena. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I've got one question here from M. Kati, right? So I'm going to read here, but you know what? I'm just going to invite you up to just tell us about a question as well, because I think that's just the best way, because I feel there's a lot of passion in there. But I'll read it anyway, and then please feel free to supplement. So he's saying, just like students with the idea of self-motivation, how would the motivation or hope be put into someone or people who struggle from something, whatever they're struggling from? So the potential solution may be helpful, but it's not just about a solution, because we as humans also have major connections of feelings to everything, which means the actual one to receive help have a major reliance on how motivated the individual is to receive the help. So I'm just going to invite, if you would like to, comfortable enough to kind of just unmute yourself and share, or would you like to tell us a bit more about the question that you really want to ask, or?
Oh,
Hi.
sure. Yeah.
Hi there.
Hi.
Thanks for joining us. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. We'll open that question up to all our panelists. Go ahead.
Can I see if I understood it correctly? And maybe take a stab at it? Would that work? And then maybe you can nod if I got it right. And okay. All right. So the way I was reading that was that, there are communities or groups of people who we can see are having issues and struggling, and we don't want to necessarily pigeonhole them as you are a homeless person, for example, and that is your struggle and that is who you are and what you are. And that a lot of the ability to intervene successfully with a program or something like that really hinges on their personal motivation. But how do we encourage that without taking ownership or pigeonholing? Is that kind of, okay. So I think probably Jose is the best suited to answer this one, but since I'm already talking, I used to work with immigrants a lot in Japan, and I think for us, back when I used to do that work with migrant communities, the most important way to ensure that we weren't putting solutions in other people's mouths was to make sure that we did our research properly first and that we took our time. I think one of the processes that people really it has gotten quite popular lately is this process of design thinking. And you can pay thousands of dollars to take a course on design thinking, but if you ask me, controversial, I know, design thinking boils down to ask them what they want and let them tell you. Stop telling them what they want. So design for your customer or for your user. So I think in this kind of situation, were you to approach a community that you see is struggling, instead of going to them and saying, hey, you probably need food, we're going to set up a soup kitchen, how's that sound? Like getting to know them and spending the time to do a more holistic assessment of, well, what do you see as your primary struggle? What do you see as a secondary struggle? What would you appreciate the most? What can you get for yourself and you can handle it, but you just need this? What can you not get for yourself that we could help you with? Right? And sort of doing that assessment from a place of listening as opposed to deliverance, I think is really, really crucial. And the more that you can get people invested in sharing through that process, the more they also, they'll take you seriously. They'll take your desire to help seriously, and they'll invest too, maybe. They might not, but that's their choice, right? So yeah, that would be my answer. I don't know, Jose, Sai, anybody else want to take a stab at it?
I'll jump in here since you kind of mentioned me. So yeah, I mean, I think, yes, you're right. You don't need to really sign up for $1,000 training per se. Thank you for your honesty, and just be genuine, be yourself. What I found in my own experiences, so a little background about myself personally is, I always go with what is your story? So you have to kind of figure out what is your own personal story. Yes, you can look me up on LinkedIn and there's lots of little things there. And yes, there was that bio at the beginning. But what is my real story is the story of an immigrant, the story of someone born in Peru in South America. But even beyond that, there's layers. We all have layers. We're all an onion trying to be peeled, and we discover ourselves in life through people we meet and just stories we attain, and just food that we taste and cultures that we experience. And so my story in my layers consists of a heritage that is indigenous Quechua, and yes, there's this colonizer of the Spaniards, but yet there's also the Japanese and the Chinese and the Italian and the Black. So there's layers. And with that experience of being an immigrant, there's the experience of adapting and the experience of the unknown, or just being part of the other. And so as I work with students or community members, yes, I listen And sometimes people don't feel comfortable speaking. And so sometimes I just share my story, and something that I say, one thing or another, you might be able to bridge that gap and be able to build. Basic philosophy of a lot of things that I do is kind of got to nudge yourself outside your comfort barrier. So if you're too comfortable doing something, it's kind of time to reevaluate it. And how do you reinvent yourself? What can you be doing that you're not doing? Going back to Sai and, reflections, journals. I teach graduate students and undergrads, and the grad students love it when they're like, oh, wow, it's actually like required for me to like write a journal, write a reflection. Like I haven't had time to do this because I'm balancing so many different things, and just being able to reflect upon what's happening in life is it's such a great way to like build up critical skills. And so, yeah, just, I would just say, is the more that you know about your own identity, the easier it'll be as you're trying to bridge that gap with other individuals out there. So keep at it.
No, we're just like 2 more minutes. You just want to, which is one more question, Jeremy, and then we have all our panelists jump in. You're still muted. You're still muted. You're still muted.
Sorry. Yes. No, so I was just about to say, I think that's about all the questions that we have so far. Mm-hmm. And if there's any questions from anybody at this point of time, or any comments from any of the panelists.
Yeah, well, we got a big thank you from our audience who was asking the question. Thank you so much. And yep. Really, I think the reason why we do these panels is really to start a dialogue and a conversation, because we do know that being socially distant can be difficult. And I think the reason why we took the time to always gather great people to come on these panels is because we know this dialogue, just the small wins that Sai was talking about, is just so important, the sense of camaraderie, and that we're really not alone. Like these small little squares that we see each other, they're not just little squares. I mean, they're real connections. So keep the conversation going and email us. I have actually got a ton more questions for our panelists, but I'm always very mindful and respectful of time. We are at the 90-minute mark. So I'll just hand it over to Jeremy to just make our closing remarks.
Sure. So, I think at the end of the day, I just really want to say a very big thank you. And I'm sure all of us will agree with me, right? We've got a great panel here today. I think a lot of learning, a lot of food for thought. So thank you very much to each and every one of you for speaking your heart. For me, I feel that I hear your heart from every one of you. So thank you very, very much. Just a quick one. This on our next panel is coming out on September 4th or September the 5th, depending on your time zone, on the future of sustainability. And again, we've got some really global leaders coming together. So we've got Minister of Education, Bhutan, Country Chair, Shell Philippines, President CEO Zurich, Switzerland, and President CEO Food Services and Food Bank from Singapore, just coming on Future Skills 101. And so if this has helped you today, we really look forward to sharing it with your friends. Let them know on these time slots, and do join us for the next panel.
That's right. And really just quickly, we'd love to partner with you. If there's a class and there's something that you want to share with us, let us know. Log onto our website. We're still building it as we speak. So feel free to drop us an email. Our email details will be on the last slide. Spread the word, get people to join on the panel, because it really is a free platform for us to exchange ideas and our thoughts and our hearts and our souls. And I even shed a few tears today when Sai showed this video. And your question, Em, was just very moving. And just hearing all our panelists sharing their hearts and their wisdoms with us. And so finally, all I really want to say is thank you so much for your time, because innovating for profit can be easy. I'm not saying it's easy, but it can be easy because there is something tangible you're working towards, money. But for us, we always believe in innovating not for profit, because we're really trying to innovate here for social change. That is the challenge. But from all of us here, I speak for my team. They're all here today. Veronica, if you just wave, Eunice, who's here, Jeremy, of course, and Wei Han, who's studying for an exam. We really believe in a common purpose. We really believe in going beyond our individual good. And I thank you all for joining us today. And just one final quote that I shared 2 weeks ago, and some of our audience asked me to share it again. I just want to end with the words of Kishore Mahbubani, who is a diplomat from Singapore. And he reminds us that if we 7.5 billion people are now stuck on a virus-infected cruise ship, does it make sense to just clean and scrub only our own personal cabins while ignoring the corridors and air wells outside through which the virus travels? And the answer is clearly no. And yet this is what we've been doing all along. And since now we are in the same boat, humanity has to take care of the global boat as a whole. So I thank you all for being here. I'm humbled. And Jeremy, you want to just share with them how we can get connected?
Yes, please. So we would love to connect with you. So please stay connected with us. And now you can log on to our website. So that's www.futureskills101.com. And we would love for you to connect with us and leave an email with us. So if you're comfortable, you can leave your email in the group chat. Please let us know how we can connect with you. If you're a little bit shy, it's okay. You can private message Veronica or myself or Loretta, your email address. But we would love to stay connected and we would love to inform you of the upcoming panels that's going to happen as well. And for the website, just to let you know, it is still work in progress, but we'll bear with us. We'll get there.
Thank you, everybody. And before we go, can we just do a little group photo? Thank you all for your time. You know, I have to confess, 2 weeks ago, I failed in my photo taking because I didn't realize there were so many people, and I need to one little picture. So we're gonna try and take a picture with all of you this time, okay? So I'm gonna try and manage this as best as I can. So, all right, say cheese, everybody. I'll come on to the next page again. Say cheese or aloha. Cheese. Thank you. I'm gonna go to the next page and yay, smile, everybody. Hang on.
So Serena's doing it.
Oh my gosh. I know, right? All right, everybody. Aloha.
All right.
Thank you all so much. I really appreciate you. I mean, this is so fun. I love you all. I adore you. Thank you so much. And our panelists as well. We're still going to keep the rooms open. So feel free to hang out. I'm definitely going to hang out with our panelists as well. So feel free to hang out. But otherwise, please join us again September 4th and 5th, depending where you are in the world. The timings are different to accommodate for all our global speakers. Drop us your email addresses in the chat so that we can send you a personal invite. Okay, thank you all so much and have a good evening. Thank you everybody, and thank you for our panelists. Thank you. That went really well. That was 90
everybody.
minutes. Gosh, it didn't even feel like it was 90 minutes. Thank you all so much. Wow.
Thank you. Thanks for having us. It was so fun.
Yeah, it was great.
I will tell you, you know, I really enjoy our panels. I think you're absolutely right, Jose. When you lean in and you're vulnerable and you give the best of you, you know, audience feel it, and they feel your sincerity. You're not just giving talking points, you're not just giving platitudes, and they feel it, you know, and it's so powerful. Yeah, and all you're sharing. Yeah.
Yeah, I personally benefit so much from this. Unbelievable. Because I think everybody really, all the panelists really shared from the heart. I mean, it was something that's very authentic. It was very genuine. And it was just life-changing just to hear, you know, each of you just kind of speaking from their heart. Yeah, really.
Yeah, what's great is the chat. I can see that they're all leaving their email addresses because they really want to stay connected, you know, and I really believe.
Yeah, that's my job. Like, please leave your email.
We want to stay connected. We really want to stay connected. Yeah. You know, and any thoughts, any questions, anything at all, please share. You know, I have so many questions for all of you. You know, since you're still here, you know, maybe I'll raise it because I see that some of our audiences, you know, they're still here waiting to hear words of wisdom, right? I mean, this was a question I really wanted to get to. You know, in the wake of George Floyd's death and Black Lives Matter, you know, how can we as a community begin to unpack and contend with all this? I mean, anyone can just feel free to jump in. I've really wanted to ask this, but I didn't get a chance to earlier. A panelist or anyone want to take that?
Are we still recording, by the way?
Oh, I can stop.